Joining us right now is former Deputy Treasury Secretary Roger Altman. He is the founder and now senior chairman of Evercore. And Roger, you're the perfect person to talk to this morning about this. This is an important job. Obviously, President-elect Trump sees it as a very important job. That's why he's taking more time with it than any of his other nomination picks at this point. What does the market want to see?
Well, let's step back for a second. I think it's the most important job, perhaps other than chief of staff, for two basic reasons.
Okay.
The first is, if you look at the election results we just saw and the exit polls, the economy was the number one voting issue.
Right.
And Trump benefited a lot from that in terms of the cost of living concerns that voters had. He's going to want to hold the House and the Senate in 26 and again in 28 and the White House. And probably the economy is again going to be the number one voting issue. Mm-hmm. Now, the most senior member of his team when it comes to economic policy is typically the Treasury Secretary. And so, first of all, from Trump's own point of view and his own self-interest, it's a critical pick. Secondly, we've seen more and more frequent financial crises over the last 40 to 50 years. Think about it. Savings and loan, long-term capital management, Mexican peso, Latin American debt crisis, European debt crisis, great financial crisis, and so forth, which is natural because the velocity of capital coursing around the world is accelerating. So, and Trump saw one of these in his first term, the COVID-related financial crisis. So you need a Treasury chief who knows what to do when that happens. And it's very hard for someone who's never been in government, and a lot of people don't quite appreciate this, to just walk in and know what they're doing in the first few months. It's just very hard.
Stephen Mnuchin did okay.
I think the idea floated today in the Wall Street Journal. Mm-hmm. I have no idea if Trump will really do it.
And by the way, the idea, for those who haven't read it yet, is that you would have Kevin Warsh, who would come in as Treasury Secretary, and then he would move to the Fed chairman position in 2026.
And I think that's an interesting and sensible idea because Kevin's been in government. He served both in the White House and at the Fed. He can walk in on day one and know what he's doing. And if you put percent at the NEC, by the time Powell's term expires and Warsh would go to the Fed, he'd be ready to serve in the Treasury. I happen to think that's a pretty good idea.
That's a very interesting way of laying this out. We have had the conversation several times about the idea that Donald Trump promised a lot of things on the campaign trail that would be hard to deliver and not have problems either with Treasury buyers who would stand up and say no way, or with the idea that inflation might take off again. Both of those things would threaten his economic prosperity and be an issue potentially in 2026. Trump is very actively looking at this role, and I wonder, are people around him saying the things that you are saying right now?
I'm not sure the answer to that, Becky, but I think the next Treasury chief has a really tough job for four reasons. Trump's agenda, tariffs, taxes, deportation, and the impact of that agenda on interest rates is going to make that Treasury person's job tough. I mean, I don't know what decision Trump will finally make on how widely he applies the tariffs. Mm-hmm. And I know this is an object of tremendous debate, but at least in my opinion, widespread application of tariffs is negative for household disposable income and ultimately negative for growth. And then deportation. And of course, it's a huge political issue, and I'm not a political expert. But we have something like 11 million undocumented people in this country. Most people say that the great majority of them, 80%, are working. We have a 4.1% unemployment rate. If you literally toss those people out of the country, all of them, it would be dreadful for the labor supply and ultimately for inflation. And then taxes. Trump wants, of course, to extend fully the 2017 tax cuts and to add some more, maybe a lower corporate rate, taxes on tips and so forth. At the margin, that's obviously deficit increasing and probably inflationary. And you add all that up and you say to yourself, what's the likely course of interest rates if those three are applied? And while the Fed may be cutting short-term rates, I think the implication for medium and long-term rates is that they'll be higher. So the next Treasury chief is going to have a tough job, and that's one of the reasons it's such an important choice.